Welcome to It's What Our Characters Would Do, the podcast where a neutral good ranger and a chaotic neutral warlock talk about RPGs, roll funny dice, and give away some sweet loot. I'm Bob World Builder.
And I'm Grace World Destroyer.
And today we're talking about Clerics. But first, Grace, how are you feeling today?
Well, Elden Ring and I are going through a trial separation right now.
Oh no. What happened?
Well, I got stuck on like 3 different bosses that are stopping me from really progressing.
Kind of at the same time because you can just like go anywhere. It's famously hard, that game.
Yeah, I mean, it's Dark Souls for babies, but even Dark Souls for babies is super hard.
Is it supposed to be, really, is it supposed to be easier than the other Dark Souls?
I don't know if it's supposed to be, but it definitely is.
Oh. Well, you're just better at it, I guess, since you played some Dark Souls first, maybe.
I think it's generally easier.
Huh.
Because enchantments are easier to get. You don't have to grind for them so much.
And so this led to a little bit of a pause.
Yeah, I've been seeing Final Fantasy VII for a while. But I'm almost at the end of that, and I am afraid it's going to destroy me emotionally. So I'm kind of afraid to finish it.
Is it actually tragic?
I don't know. I feel like it's going to be.
Yeah. 'Cause, I mean, from what I see of Final Fantasy, when I come in the room, and you got this guy with the huge sword.
Fat chocobo.
There's occasionally like giant chicken-like animals. There was the dance contest mini game.
Don't
the
talk
one
about
time.
the dance contest.
Oh, I'll talk about the dance. I mean, that's all I really have to say about it. There was one. But yeah, the game seems like it adds in a lot of silly stuff. So the fact that it could end in a way that has you emotionally distressed shocks me.
Well, Kingdom Hearts ends in emotional distress.
Really?
Yes.
Even Gorsh with
yes.
like with how silly
even
it is.
with that.
Yeah, I mean, again, I've never played any of those games. I watched, in the days of like well before streaming any video games existed, of course, when people would actually just watch a friend play video games. That's how I experienced Kingdom Hearts. Just like my neighbor friend, I watched him play a lot of Kingdom Hearts, and we would just talk about it.
It is a really good game. Kingdom Hearts 2 is not, but yeah.
And I was just going to add in other news, not an intentional separation by any means, but Grace and I found out that we are not legally, according to the state of Pennsylvania, currently married. Because our
clerical error.
Oh yeah,
basically.
Yeah, clerical error. My most popular tweet ever, actually, making that joke. Our officiant wrote the wrong date on the form that he sent in to the courthouse, the county courthouse, and because it happened to be within like the waiting period, like too soon after we got the false date was too soon after we got our application. The state was like, nope, this doesn't count.
You didn't wait long enough, even though we actually did.
Yeah, even though we technically did, and we literally have obviously tons of evidence and witnesses that it occurred not on that day. But yeah, so a little bit of a headache for us.
Yeah, there's some hoops that have to be jumped through now.
Had to make some phone calls,
which nobody likes.
It's a hoop in its own. But in fun news, I've also been wrapping up writing an adventure for actually. I don't know. I never signed anything saying I shouldn't talk about this. And they never told me I shouldn't talk about this. I think it's fine to talk about this.
Yeah, it's probably fine.
And there's only 100 people that listen to this anyway. So yeah. It's cool.
For now.
Until this is extremely famous. I'm writing an adventure for Goodman Games, publishers of Dungeon Crawl Classics, but for their 5th edition fantasy series that will be published, assuming everything works out with Free RPG Day this year, for their Free RPG Day little adventure that'll go out. So I'll probably say something about that later as it approaches. That'll be in the summer of 2023. So keep your ears open for updates about that. So we're ready for the quick build where we try to summarize the topic/goal of this episode in 3d6 words or less. And I did it last time. Grace is ready for it this time. You ready?
Mm-hmm.
Wow. All right, sweet. You got a total of 14 words to do this, so Clerics.
Okay. And I can do it in less words, right?
Of course, yeah.
Let's see. Clerics are just guys who can heal, but also fight. I have never cleric.
It sounded like it ended like a good haiku.
It didn't.
it probably didn't. But and I realized, I mean, no offense, but didn't even mention gods.
Well, so
it kind of summarized
like,
a cleric, I
it
guess.
Doesn't have to. I know paladins are like, it comes from the oath, but like, I think even clerics, it doesn't have to come from a god.
I don't know.
Is that a thing now?
It probably is. It probably is. But this is a great thing to talk about. Because like one of the questions I saw on here that didn't make our top 6 here for the part 2 of this podcast, but it brought up the question of like, philosophically, what's the difference between a warlock and a cleric? And I've already gone on record in videos saying that there really is none outside of the mechanics.
I think the difference is a cleric's power is based on faith and reverence, whereas a warlock's power is based on a deal that has been struck.
So I guess you could say the connection is based on different things there.
Yes.
But like the power itself
is same.
Based on the same thing.
I mean, I'm always open to people using deities as warlock patrons and warlock patrons as
exactly.
Cleric
We
deities,
we don't police that in our games because I think we share the same opinion that like it is pretty much the same. And specifically that time around, I guess because they specifically said, you know, a warlock pact. What's the difference between that and like a cleric's bond? But it made me think of a paladin's oath. And so yeah, it's like literally paladin oath, warlock pact, you know, cleric vow, whatever you want to call it. Like it's all the same. It's all the same to me. It's just like, okay, this character who is divinely or whatever, like elementally or arcanely infused with this supernatural abilities. But to me, it's very much the same, philosophically speaking, to answer that question.
I agree. In my setting, cleric power isn't even like given by the gods. It's just something that clerics can tap into and take.
Right. And that's actually something I was thinking about, is because I feel like in some cases for warlocks, it is, especially for like great old ones, like they don't even necessarily
great old ones don't even know
anybody's worshiping them.
A human is so small, and great old ones are even like, I think, like more powerful and older than deities
gods in some cases. Yeah.
So like
depends on your lore. So
a mortal, it's so tiny to them that it's like it doesn't even register to them that a mortal is
they don't
paying
even
attention.
know any of their powers getting. It's like literally tapping into the power grid with like some extra device that's just undetectable because it's so tiny compared to the amount of power that is there.
And they don't care. Where a deity might care.
Right.
A great old one literally like.
So yeah, that's why it's all really just dependent on your lore. Now in 5e, I do think it probably, I mean, obviously they have distinctions with their mechanics, and in 5e it really tries to force distinctions with the lore, which are fair enough because that's their setting. You know, that's the lore of the Forgotten Realms, at least for 5e.
That's the lore of the Forgotten Realms homebrew setting.
Yeah, of the official homebrew setting. And I was thinking about that. Like, it's really interesting how probably millions of people have just played some guy's homebrew setting, you know? Mm-hmm. Like tens of millions of people just playing the Forgotten Realms. And then to the point where some of these idiots, like, sorry, but I mean, I'm not sorry because none of them are listening to this, but like get really angry when Wizard of the Coast tries to change the lore because it's so beloved. So it's kind of a testament to like how much people like it, but it's just some guy's game.
Just some guy.
Yeah. So something funny that Grace and I realized preparing for this was that we don't really have any of our own funny stories related to playing or running for clerics in the party.
Yeah, neither. Well, you played one cleric.
I played 2. One of them was just a one-shot, a Firbolg with a sailor background. Don't even remember the domain, but we were level 2. And the only thing that we could remember from this was a little one-shot we played with Grace's sister and her fiance. Only thing we could remember from this was Grace saying that her character had accidentally killed like some street rat kid.
A street urchin. It was a wild magic sorcerer, and she like
Whoops.
rolled, I think,
I don't
some
even,
kind of
it
like
wasn't like a fireball. We would remember
lightning
that.
magic or something that killed a street urchin. So
Can you remember if my cleric was able to heal them? I mean, definitely not revive them at level 2.
no, nobody revived them. I remember and feeling really bad about it because I wasn't intending to be
Of course, yeah,
this like
of course.
loose cannon, but it just kind of happened.
Hey, wild magic. Gonna be wild sometimes.
It's wild.
And the only other cleric that I've played was Ren something Featherflicker. He definitely had a middle name that I can't remember. And he had that name Featherflicker because he was a knowledge domain cleric. And the whole idea was he carried around this giant book, and he was just a little deep gnome, and he would write everything the party did in this book. So it was always, flicking around this like quill. And the thing is, even in my memory of playing that character, I always, at first, like my gut instinct is thinking of them as a wizard. Because that's kind of how I played it more so, because there was this emphasis on the book and his magic was in there as well. And I don't think he really had a strong connection to a deity, to go back to what we were talking about before too. Like, does there have to be a god? I think there was one.
There was. I don't even remember what that deity was in that setting.
So
I also don't remember what happened to that character because you switched, but I know it was your choice.
Right. So this was Out of the Abyss, and when the party left the Underdark, there's a time where they got to go to the surface. He was like, yeah, I'm not going back there.
Yeah. Which is an inherent problem with that setting or that
campaign
module. Yeah. It's like, who wants to go back
into
a giant cave system and fight demons?
Yeah.
I mean, unless all of your group is very heroic, which this group wasn't really like that.
Not really. Everybody was kind of doing their own thing.
Yeah.
But actually, it's reminding me, in that same campaign, not a cleric, this was a warlock, but Steven was playing a Kenku named Crow.
Yes.
That was a warlock of the Raven Queen.
Yep.
And had a familiar raven.
Yes.
So he was like this giant crow named Crow of the Raven Queen with a little raven.
Yeah, and his whole goal in being a warlock was to learn how to fly.
Yeah.
But he died.
Yeah, and that was like the big thing. I think that was part of a kind of like, from a roleplay perspective, kind of part of the reason I, as the cleric of that party, was just like, okay, I'm done with this character, because I wasn't even able to save like the one guy who died.
Because as a wizard cleric,
I think I didn't have a lot of the healing spells.
Focus on healing.
And my issue was like, frankly, this may be an issue just with clerics in general. And the concept of prepared spells that they use is I never felt like I had the right spells at the right time. So it was just always like, I don't know. I didn't love that, how it actually played mechanically. So yeah, I was ready to move on. And then I played a rogue.
Yep.
Rogue tiefling. It was a lot more fun. I love rogues.
Me too.
Maybe we'll do a rogue podcast next.
We have a lot more experience with that, I think.
Yeah. Oh yeah. I mean, well, we don't have to get into it too much now, but I've played at least 2 rogues then, and you've played rogues multi-class with other things a couple times.
Yeah. Favorite character of all time was a rogue multi-class. Rogue warlock multi-class.
Yeah. But also just thinking about sort of the history of clerics in D&D. Like, of course, originally, it was very much you worship a god, and it's like a divine thing, and your whole thing, obviously in D&D to this day, it's like getting rid of undead and unholy and evil stuff. And something that just struck me as interesting about all that, though, was how I think from basic or like original D&D to today, I think the cleric is the only class that technically kept the same name that whole time. Because originally it was even like the fighting man became the fighter.
Oh.
And it was like the thief became, the rogue. And now in basic, it might have actually been called a wizard, but then in 1E, like the books that I have, Advanced Dungeons & Dragons, they called it a magic user. But like cleric has always been cleric. And I thought that was interesting because personally, it was always one of the names that I thought was the weirdest. Like priest would make a lot of sense to me. I don't know.
But priest is a background, isn't it?
No, it might be
it's
now.
just like an NPC.
But you know what I mean?
Monster.
Like I don't think I've ever heard the word cleric really used outside of D&D.
Neither have I. Like, what is it exactly?
Yeah, the same thing always confused me with paladin, honestly. But paladin is like a King Arthur thing, right?
I don't know.
I think the like Knights of the Round Table were all considered like paladins because they're inspired by God.
Yeah, the only Arthurian legend related thing that I've ever read was Mists of Avalon, and that was mostly about the women of the story.
Right.
So
it might even be like the name of another sword or something. I could be totally getting that wrong. So leave a comment if you know where Paladin came from. And as far as cleric goes, yeah, the only other reference actually that's coming to me now that I've ever heard of the word cleric was in this RTS strategy game that I played as a kid and loved called Stronghold Crusader.
Your real-time strategy game, Bob?
Yeah. I mean, I was saying that for people who don't know what RTS means. But obviously all these cool nerds do. The Crusades, of course, literally called Holy Wars. And you would play as like one of these rulers. You could basically be a bunch were from Europe and a bunch were from like the Middle East. And one of them was called, I can't remember his full name now because he was usually called just like the Sultan, but one of his like aspects just called Sultan something, the cleric. And that's the only thing I remember. So yeah, cleric's a weird word, and I'm surprised that it has lasted this long.
Well, they can't change it now because it's gone so far from just being a priest at this point, so.
Yeah, they'll never change it now.
Yeah.
Maybe actually that's probably what it means. Is it probably literally means like a warrior priest. Because that's what a cleric always has been too. And that would be a good reason to not just call it a priest. All right, we figured it out. It's time for a break. We're going to take a short rest and see you in a minute. And now it's time for a random encounter, where we roll to read your stories and questions generally about this topic, and the person who wrote our favorite story or question takes home some loot.
6.
6 comes from John Arbuckle. I didn't actually realize that earlier. That's the name of the Garfield character, right?
Yep.
Okay. I'm currently DMing Icewind Dale, thanks to your guides. Thanks. And they recently did the Missing Iron Ingots quest with the Black Blades. Everything is going according to the book until they get to the War Wagon. The wizard casts sleep on the kobolds, and they do a surprise attack, instantly wiping them out. According to the book, the leader, when faced with defeat, sets the wagon on fire. As she does this and the flames start spreading, the bugbear rogue asks if he could do a dex save to extinguish the fire using some snow buildup on the wagon. Sure, I say, making up some high number like, oh, he rolled a nat 20. So yeah, now they have a big war wagon and 2 polar bear mounts, befriended by our druid, and are just completely ignoring the tavern features, and even are selling soup out of it thanks to the magic cauldron found in the Hag's Cave. They're literally a food truck and are passing all the rolls required to be successful. I'm not even sure they want to defeat Auril, because the weather is their greatest ally to their business right now.
Such a great story.
Yeah, I mean, unfortunately not related to clerics, but I just thought that was funny.
Yeah, I love the idea of like a soup kitchen on wheels.
Soup kitchen food truck.
Yeah.
And hey, that's what you get, like trusting the dice. That's what you're going to get. That's a good story.
Yeah, so fun. I think in our Icewind Dale game, we wound up using our tavern to basically accumulate like mascots.
Companions. Yeah.
Every time we met an
kobolds.
NPC or monster that we liked, we'd be like, oh, why don't you go live at our tavern?
Yeah.
So they're kind of missing out on that part.
Yeah, if it's mobile.
But still pretty awesome.
Yeah. And hey, that is actually like an interesting loophole through Icewind Dale, assuming it's like the war wagon is also weather sealed, I guess. They could pretty much just survive in there. All right, let's roll another one.
1.
From Firkin73. If one of your player characters was bitten by a zombie, would you wait for them to turn before you killed them?
So the first thing,
Yeah.
in D&D 5e mechanics, being bit by a zombie doesn't turn you into a zombie.
It doesn't.
Even though it should.
It totally should.
We feel like it should.
Yeah, that's like why I really wanted this question in here, because even though maybe it's a little misled, maybe this is just how they play, I'm not sure, but I absolutely think zombies should work this way, because that is the popular headcanon of any like new player who's gonna play D&D.
Yeah,
And
I
it's cooler
think
that
I
way.
get it, because zombies in D&D are usually animated by magic, which is not
Right.
contagious.
Exactly. It's supposed to be necromancy,
right,
not disease.
in real world sci-fi, it's usually a virus. So like it's different, but like that is what you expect. Like you said, that's what new players think will happen if they get bitten.
Yeah.
That could actually be a really like interesting misunderstanding if all the players believe that if they get bitten by a zombie, they're going to turn. Then they have to have this conversation. Are we going to kill
Oh my gosh, yeah.
this PC?
Yeah.
As the DM, I don't know if I would step in and correct them or not. I might allow like an Arcana roll.
Oh, to know if it would
To
actually
know.
happen. Yeah.
But I probably wouldn't be like,
Yeah, I mean,
that won't happen.
I think for the purposes of D&D, I would have to, because I'm just brainstorming now, it would occur if the character was bitten and then died, or died from a zombie bite, or if they're bitten but then like failed a series of con checks over a few days or something. And in that meantime, they'd be like, you know, racing against the clock to try to find whatever cure they needed.
Yeah, I think in like zombie media, what would kill you would be the infection that you inevitably get from a zombie bite, because it's just like dead
Oh, true. Yeah, so you just
bacteria and stuff entering your flesh.
Yeah, maybe you have like
or the virus kills you
right.
itself.
So it's
that's
like
what
after
happens in
bitten
Walking
by a
Dead.
zombie, you have a number of like a random number of days to live, and if you die from this thing, or just in the meantime by anything else, I guess,
Then you become a
return
zombie.
as a zombie.
But to answer the actual question, like, would you do it before they turn or not? I think that depends on the cleric, because, or it depends on the person who got bit.
Mhm.
What do they want?
Yeah.
Do they want to turn first? Do they want to live out their last days? Or do they want to be put down, so to speak, before they can harm anybody?
But yeah, really dramatic question. I like that one. And it connects to an honorable mention we're throwing in here. This comment, oh yeah, it's a little side note for listeners. The contest details do say like, yeah, to be a subscriber, but to be a public subscriber. So I can specifically see, like in my little view, I get a little tag of like who's public subscriber and who's not, which helps me sort out these things. So this one came from somebody who wasn't a public subscriber, but a really great story and the most popular one on the post. So here it is from Ello here. A player new to D&D started playing. After a few sessions, they find a horde of skeletons and zombies. Cleric decides to use Turn Undead, and as undead, infiltrate the enemy. We had to explain that's not what Turn Undead means. And I just thought that was funny, because I feel like way back, I was confused about that as well. I don't know, like I thought Turn Undead either just like kill them immediately, but it's literally, it just like...
Just makes them run away. It's not that useful until higher levels when you can destroy undead.
Yeah. I mean, it's still useful when you're facing undead, but it's, you know, obviously very case specific. But yeah, that was a funny one.
4.
Wow, we're actually like not getting a bunch of repeats this time so far.
I think you just jinxed us, though.
Maybe you did.
We're going to get one now.
Samuel Tier. How often do you have the cleric's chosen deity converse or send messages to their cleric outside of a specific spell, commune, etc.?
Not that often. I think a lot of people use dreams to do this.
Yeah, I was going to say
and
I almost never use spells.
I did too for a while, but then I started to realize how overused it is.
Kind of tropey.
Yeah, it's tropey. So I don't really like to do that anymore.
So how do you do it besides spells and dreams?
I use signs now. Like I have a player character in my home game who is not a cleric, but has some like deity related stuff going on with them.
Yeah.
Specifically the Raven Queen.
Okay.
So I send like ravens.
That's cool.
I have them hear like auditory hallucinations of things, but not really, he doesn't like dream about stuff.
Yeah, I like that a lot though, because that's, frankly, that is so much more, I don't, relatable is not the right word, but more like tangible, more realistic, I guess I would just say.
Yeah, and
because that is how people in the real world a lot of times like think or you know, believe whatever, that they're interacting with something supernatural.
And
like through these weird signs.
I don't want the deity to just come up and be like, this is what I think about you and how I feel and what I want you to do. I want the character to have to interpret that for themselves.
Exactly. Yeah, and that's the cool thing about a sign is it's all up to interpretation.
Yeah, unless they are using a spell in which the deity will come to them and be like, this is what I want you to do and this is what's happening.
And that makes sense then, because if the spell has a cost associated with it, it should have a little more clarity, I guess.
Yes.
So yeah, I definitely think dreams, if they're going to use dreams, like keep it vague, don't overdo it. Like I'll say something recently, this was prompted by a player, but in my Dragon of Stormwreck Isle campaign, a paladin character said a little prayer to Bahamut, the platinum dragon, and then asked like, yeah, and is there any kind of like sign that they heard me? And one of the signs of Bahamut, as is listed in this story at least, is 7 canaries that are like around this statue of the humanoid form of Bahamut. So I had like a canary come and like land on them briefly or something. But that was it. And then it just flew away.
Yeah. And I am recalling now, in Out of the Abyss, other Steven, who I called for a while Fresh Steve. There are 2 Stevens in our life. One with a PH, one with a V. This is Steven with a V, not Steven the animal. He was playing a cleric. His second character, he cast like augury or something, one of the spells that basically gets you a yes or no.
Right.
But instead of saying, like, your god says yes, I think I said, you get the image of a candle or a flame or something to indicate yes. And I tried to let him interpret it himself, but I don't think he really did.
I feel like Steven would have the habit of interpreting it in an intentionally interpreted way, just because that's how he likes to play, I think.
Yeah, I don't know. I might have wound up telling him, like, you feel like the answer is yes.
Yeah. So this also reminded me, hey, it could be fun to just, like, use a magic 8-ball. But I think it's time to roll another question.
2.
From Steven Anderson. Also not a repeat. The gods are on our side. I'm fairly new to D&D, started playing this year, but I always hear that players shouldn't try to be dedicated healers. Have you ever played or thought of playing without healing spells? Basically say they don't exist for a campaign or something. Would that make clerics more or less powerful since you would be relying on their more defensive and buff spells rather than using them all on healing? Very interesting question.
I've definitely thought about it. Not having healing spells. Definitely something you have to talk about beforehand.
Oh yeah, absolutely. Got to be agreed upon.
You can't have someone playing a life cleric and then you tell them, oh, oops, no healing spells.
Yeah, and frankly, like, again, this person said all their players are new. And actually, that's funny, Steven with a V. But we were just talking about that. But we were just saying, you know, there's new players, so they are not going to have a lot of familiarity with 5e. But people who do have a lot of familiarity with 5e are going to expect a lot of healing and that it's hard to die. So if you're going to take that away, it's really got to be agreed upon by the group.
Yes. And also in general, I don't believe in having like set roles that need to be filled.
Yeah. Oh yeah, that's true too.
I really hate it when I have a new player coming in and other players are like, oh, we need a healer or we need a tank. And then that person who's new feels pressured to make a character. Role. I hate that. Yeah. I always tell...
Well, and it's also not true in 5e.
Yeah, I tell...
You could have a single class party.
I tell my characters or my players, if there's a role that I as the DM feel needs to be filled, I'll fill it with a sidekick.
Yeah.
Like, none of you have to be a healer. I'll give you a healer NPC if you really need one.
Yeah.
Which my one party actually really does. So I will be giving them one.
Yeah. Well,
but I didn't want anyone to have to do something they don't really want to do for the sake of appeasing the rest of the party.
Yeah. I mean, that's a really, talking about clerics being the like most historic class, maybe at least in their name.
And I think people like have negative associations with cleric because they feel like if they play one, they're going to be forced into this role of being the healer.
Right. So what I was trying to say is, like, in old school D&D, when there were literally around 4 to 6 classes, I guess, depending on exactly what era of old school D&D you're playing, each class was incredibly distinct from one another. They literally had separate roles that could not be fulfilled by the other classes. In 5e, there's so much blurred lines. Like we just said, warlock, paladin, cleric, like, can all heal. A druid can heal. A bard can heal. You don't need just a cleric to do
Monks
that.
can heal now.
Monks can, like, everybody has at least one subclass that can heal. I'm sure of it without having to look it up. So it's like that idea of needing to fill the party. I think it probably, I don't know, could that have been carried into the modern day by like World of Warcraft or something? Like,
Or
was
like
that a
any
thing?
video game.
Right, because those were all based on old school D&D.
Yeah, like Final
So-
Fantasy comes to mind for me. Like when I was playing 12, I always had one character that was just like a heal bot throwing potions at everybody and doing nothing else.
Yeah, so it's a really, I don't know, in a way it's a cool traditional way to think about the party, but but mechanically it does not apply to 5e at least. So it's not really a thing you need to worry about.
Yeah,
honestly.
don't worry about it.
Don't
Do
worry
whatever
about
you
it.
want. Tell your players to do whatever they
Exactly.
want.
Yeah,
Give them a NPC if they need it.
yeah.
6 again.
Okay,
You
well,
double
first
jinxed
well,
it.
now there's only 2 left, so I think
We did 2, right? Yes.
we did 1, 2,
5.
bingo. Bad Bargain Bryce says, after years, D&D for some does unfortunately get old. They feel as if they've consumed all the hobby has to offer, played every kind of character, and run all sorts of campaigns. What keeps you playing all the time, years after running and being a PC in games?
I feel like I haven't done
Yeah.
everything there
Yeah,
is.
we talked about this beforehand.
And they're making new content so quickly, like
Yeah.
way faster than
It's
I
too
could
much
play
to even
it.
keep up with.
Yeah, so I still feel like my options are limitless, and I feel like I could do anything with 5e that I wanted to. So that's how I keep it fresh, just by the fact that I feel like
Yeah,
it is being kept fresh.
Sticking to the official content, you can't really run out of stuff to do unless you're literally playing like 4 or 5 times a week, and you've started like 5 to 10 years ago. But I don't know. For me, I'll say like, yeah, sure, I'm interested in other systems now. I got my DCC, but we don't have like a campaign of that running yet. And played a little bit of Call of Cthulhu as well.
I've
There's,
got
like,
Thirsty Sword Lesbians,
Yeah.
but have yet to find a
Yeah,
group that will play that with
exactly.
me.
You know, I got Skate Wizards on the shelf behind me. Like we got a couple other games that it's fun to read, fun to be inspired by.
I
And
want to
once we have a
combine
regular,
Thirsty Sword Lesbians and Skate Wizards.
they're pretty different systems, but could be done, I'm sure. And yeah, so eventually when we have a regular group playing all the time, we probably will mix in these other systems occasionally. Like, oh, the whole group's not here, let's play this one tonight. But yeah, I think there's so much in D&D that I guess my advice would just be to, yeah, maybe look outside the hobby, maybe look into some other games, but honestly just like watch some cool shows, watch some cool movies, read some cool books, and you'll have tons of ideas to go back to D&D and make it fresh. Okay.
3.
And our last question / question comes from Cody Rack. As a pastor, IRL, I've never cast Cure Wounds or Spirit Guardians, but I have spent a lot of time listening to people, caring for their needs, and praying. In 5e, the cleric prepares their spells by praying. My question is, does anyone RP that moment? I mostly see it hand-waved in actual play shows. I get that prayer can be a very personal or private thing, but how would you reflavor divine magic as a prayer?
I want to use prayer more. I would like to play a character that is devout and takes their prayer and their worship time very seriously. But you have to consider that there's probably 3 to 4 other players sitting at the table who then can't participate in that moment with you. So if you want to do it to be polite, you kind of have to keep it quick.
Mm-hmm.
I did this with my paladin character, Aegis, who was very devoted to Shar. But I think I only did one time where I actually talked about her like going off to pray. And she was a paladin, so like she didn't really have to pray to get her spells.
I'm
but
not sure how it works.
She just did.
Yeah. Yeah. And similarly, my most devout character was a paladin barbarian, or really, it was just a zealot barbarian, actually, that I played in your mini campaign and that I look back on very fondly. An orc named Hantu who worshipped Zerial, the devil?
Yeah, she's an archdevil.
Yeah, she's an archdevil. And he wore a huge set of like 9 giant prayer beads, and he would roll the beads in the blood of his enemies because it would like after it like filled all 9 or something, it would grant him some kind of boost.
Yeah, but
his
he had to
attacks.
do it, or else his own soul would like get sucked into his sword.
Yeah, and that was just a cool thing that, like, Grace was a DM. I was playing that character, and we just like agreed on this cool thing that he does. So it had a mechanical basis, and and it didn't take a lot of like game time or something. And I didn't always like go into detail with it.
There was like downtime where you would have to go off and like
Right.
kill someone because it had to
Yeah,
be
that
of
actually-
a
it had to
certain
be within a
intelligence
certain amount of
level
time.
and
Yeah.
within a certain number of days. Yeah.
So that was a thing. Yeah. And yeah, like I said, that's probably the most devout character I've played, and we made it work that way. Yeah, so I guess it's just a matter of letting the player really decide what's going on, but also obviously the DM has to approve it, and it can't be something that takes away too much time from the other characters. That's it.
I mean, it's cool if you have at least 2 characters who are like devoted to the same god.
Yeah, that would really
Then they
help.
can pray together as like important bonding moments for them.
Yeah.
Then you have at least one other person involved. But I definitely like the idea of not hand waving it.
Yeah, I agree with that for sure. All right. But for our favorite story/question, this episode's loot winner is Steven Anderson. Woo! You're going home with a mystery dice set from Only Crits. Well done. Now, if you enjoyed this episode, please share it with a friend, and I almost forgot about this.
Pat that like button.
Pat that like
Pat it.
button. To be eligible for loot and support this show, consider subscribing or joining Patreon through the links below. Patrons also get a private RSS link to listen through your favorite podcast platform and a bunch of 5e one-shot adventures. Thank you for your support, and keep building.
Stop building.